Hello and welcome back to my channel. It's Monday and it's a bit stifling hot in Manchester. I thought I'd catch up with some of my reading stuff. Yesterday I finished reading More Than Human, Theodore Sturgeon, which is the first of my dipping into the Gollancz science fiction masterworks. It occurred to me last week, I think, or the week before, when I'd seen somebody's blog about the best of the sci-fi classics and the Masterworks series, and I was wondering about how many of them I'd actually read for myself, and there were fewer than I thought. There were the obvious ones like Richard Matheson's I Am Legend or Kurt Vonnegut's The Sirens of Titan, things that I read in 2000, in 1985. I can picture myself reading those books back then. And things like Daniel Keyes' Flowers for Algernon, which I read in the early 2000s, and that absolutely blew my mind and broke my heart. Anyway, last week I ordered a whole load from, I think it's called Smikle Books online, and then I was in town and I went to FOP, where they have them even cheaper. They're 2 for £7, a whole load of different ones. And I rebought More Than Human, Theodore Sturgeon. And actually, when I looked back in my reading journals, I've read this before. I had a feeling it's like a kind of goose stepping on your grave. That feeling of I've read this before. And when I look back, it was in 2012. Even though that's 12 years ago, I should still recall it better than I did. I think it just kind of went a bit amorphous in my head in that time. It's such a very strange book. The heart of it is, it's in 3 parts, and the middle bit is the novella that I think came first. And that's the most vivid section, I think. It's about a group of children, all of different abilities, with different things wrong with them, who get together, and they're a kind of gestalt entity. That's the word that gets used, which means a kind of creature composed of different parts that work together in symbiotic relationship. And this is a kind of, future development of humans. This is the next stage in evolution when the baby who can't talk can pass on this amazing knowledge it has to the other bits of the body. The 2 girls who are the arms, the older girl who is the voice piece for the brain baby, and there's an older male character who is their body, or the person who does things in the world for them. And there's something very tragic about this setup, about these characters working together. The world misunderstands them. They misunderstand themselves. There are murders, and they're taken in by a woman who doesn't quite understand what's going on. And the bit that I remember, and the bit that was most vivid again, was where she tries to have the baby put away in care, and the other children campaign. They do more than campaign. They force her to bring the baby back. And I kind of wish there was more of this book set in those moments. We then get scenes at the end with a psychiatrist and stuff at the beginning about leading up to how they all get together. And you feel like you do in some of these science fiction books that there's a bit of padding. Maybe padding's too brutal a word, but often these things were stories, long stories in the first place from magazines that then had to become books. And there's a bit of a tradition of that in mid-century science fiction. Stories made deliberately longer. Anyway, I loved the writing of this. I loved even when it was a bit vague and a bit mystical and a bit peculiar, and you had to reorient and think, where are we now and who are we with? And there was quite a lot of that. Even then, the writing was so entertaining just by itself that it was more than enough to carry me through a weekend of sitting in the garden and reading. So it's set me up well for a bit more science fiction. Look, I'm even wearing yellow Goldberg colours, like they always have them there. I think they're a bit yellow. These new reprints are slightly yellow everywhere. I think I'm going to space these out through the rest of the year, some of these science fiction novels that I read. I couldn't spend my whole time in science fiction, I don't think, in this kind of this very psychological and strange science fiction of the 50s and 60s, which is what I seem to have specialised in collecting over the years. Yeah, I couldn't spend all my time in that. It's nice to dip into in between other things. My ideal is to go from genre to genre, so you can have some weird, trippy science fiction followed by a very sensible 1930s murder mystery in a more solid world, and then maybe back to a Victorian era thing. It's all time travel, isn't it? Maybe I get that from my love of Doctor Who, the idea that each story should be very different to the last one, and we zigzag through time and space. It could go back to that, in fact. Anyway, I'm not sure what I'm going to read next. At the moment, I'm reading Wild Mind by Natalie Goldberg for my own private book club. It's her book on writing from the 90s, which I first read in the late 90s, where she expands on the ideas of her first book, Writing Down the Bones. There's a lot about spontaneous expression and digging down deeply into your thoughts to find out what it really is you want to write about. And that's always useful for me to remind myself of, really. And I've read this book, it turns out, now that I look back at my reading journals, at least 4 times. And so this summer's return is one, well, there's lots of familiarity to the book, but also there's lots to that I'd forgotten. She's a very self-effacing person. That's what's very nice about it. I am fed up with people who just blag on and show off and tell us what a genius they are all the time. There's too much of that goes on in the arts. And I suppose it's just defensiveness. People have to defend their territory and show off and try and grab some space. But it's a dreadful way of carrying on, I think. And I suppose this links back to the Theodore Sturgeon book, that those are characters, those children who would be abandoned by the world, cast off, and seen as useless. And he unites them into one amazing creature that can, invent anti-gravity machines and things that are more powerful and brilliant than the sum of their parts. And that's very interesting, isn't it? I wonder if Ransom Riggs, when he wrote the Peculiar Home for Peculiar Children, whatever it's called, I wonder if he drew upon Theodore Sturgeon somehow in that, because that kind of super team of variously strangely gifted children is kind of similar in some ways. It's a development of that. Anyway, yes, I'm going to think more about people being modest and self-effacing in writing and concentrate on that, because I really have had enough of people who brag and go on and on. That's all I'll say about that. I hope I don't brag and go on and on, even though I choose to talk to you every day through the medium of this. Right, I hope you're having a nice week and that you have found good things to read, and that the weather is good where you are as well and not too warm. And I hope your cat isn't sulking as much as mine is. He's gone a bit grumpy. Okay, goodbye. I'll see you again soon in the next episode.